That's like all three of us from different
Yeah,
accounts.
one is me.
Okay, I think we are live now. Uh, I okay. The video hasn't
Yeah.
loaded yet. Yup, we are perfect. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to Two Studio Heads Walk Into a Bar. This is a space that we have created for a few months now, where we have been discussing the business side of small creative service agencies. Uh, and when I say small creative service agencies, you could also be like a independent consultant or a freelancer or tiny 2 3 person studios or even 5 to 10 to 15 people studios. Uh, when we talk about business topics, this is the space where we don't have to dive into design as much or engineering as much and all the other spaces which already exist out there. And because we did not get a space to talk about how do you run a company, how do you deal with clients, how do you deal with contracts, and so on and so forth, so we kind of decided to do this conversation on every alternate weekend, taking one topic at a time. Today, there are three of us. We have met a few times and had different conversations before. Uh, I'll start off with my introduction. I'm Souvik. I run Miranj, which is a small strategic web design and development studio. We are based out of New Delhi and Cambodia. Then we have Nav. Nav, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone. Yeah, my name's Nav. I ran a studio in Singapore for majority of the last decade, and also worked in a studio as well till recently, where I've now gone in house as
That's
an
great.
ad tech
And
company.
and Tejas, who has been quite a regular. Tejas, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Tejas. I run a small design studio called Three Sided Coin. We design products and content editorial websites, basically digital experiences. Uh, and I live in Ahmedabad, but we have team members in Bangalore, Mumbai, Hyderabad, pretty much like all across the country.
All right. So at this stage, I would just remind everyone that we are there on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is at Two Studio Heads. You could see this as a live stream on Twitter as well on the Two Studio Heads channel, as well as on YouTube, where we are broadcasting. And throughout the conversation, if you have any questions, anything that you would like to ask and discuss with us, please use the YouTube comment stream, that is the live comment stream, to ask questions which we can take up during our conversation as well. Coming to today's topic, this is episode number 8, letting a client go. And I believe this is kind of an unpopular topic because everyone wants to talk about how to get new business, more business, how do we keep clients happy. But I guess this is also a thing uh, that happens when you are in a client relationship and the things are not going well. Then how do you take the hard decision of ending a relationship? And it probably happens with all design studios, service studios, engineering studios, in their lifetime, that there would be some sour relationships. So in this group, let me just do a quick round of quick check-in. Have you experienced a case where you have had to let a client go while you have been running a business? Let's start with Nav.
Yeah, definitely. Some positive, or let's say, not too bad endings of projects, and some quite sour, even to the extent of we wanted to make sure that the client understood, very clearly why we were leaving, and it wasn't. We kind of like one needed to make a point, not wanted to, but needed to make a point almost. Yeah, definitely.
Tejas, have you experienced letting a client go?
We have a few times actually. We try to make it such that it's more smoother sort of a way, or at least there's no bad blood. But over a period of time, you often have a few where there is bad blood. But yeah, like Nav said, you want to make sure, you want to make it a point when you are ending it. So yeah.
Let me just
Yeah.
also
However,
add, the reverse has also happened a bunch of times where the client has also let us go as well.
yeah,
Yeah, with full
That's not
humility, I
always.
think that should also be accepted, that
Yeah.
that when you're in a business relationship, some don't go well, and sometimes you have to be let go, and sometimes the client has to be let go. uh, in my case, I was actually doing a quick check of I opened our accounts software right before this call, and I ran through the list of all our clients in that accounting to just do a check of where are the ones where we did an exit like this, like letting clients go. And I kind of was realizing that there are mm, different stages at which we have let clients go. Like there have been stages where with because it was like a trip down memory lane where, oh, this project is something that we were doing the work and we had to stop the work in between and say that we can't carry on anymore. There are a bunch of clients with who I we had completed a phase, and we were in a place that we don't want to start the next phase. So that kind of a thing has also happened. There have definitely been cases wherein during the sales conversation, we would uh, everything can work. We could sign on the project, but there are certain things that for which we would never take up the thing. That's a number that I could never find out from our going through our accounts list, because those
Mhm.
clients never made it to the list. And interestingly, I just remembered there was also one case wherein we had offered to end the project, but the client did not accept it, and things turned for the better towards a closure. So this was also a memory I had from like about 4 or 5 years back, in the sense. So all total, when we went through like about three very clear exits, like closures, one of them like this, and about six or seven where it's in the gray, and I'll talk more about it as we go on. So at what stages have you experienced these things, wanting to not continue, wanting to end a project, Tejas?
uh, so there are different things. I think one of the earliest one was when we realized that we had been doing the work, but client and us, we are not just on the same page in terms of the deliverables, both the quality of deliverables, the direction of the deliverables, but also at what stage the deliverables were. And we realized that we are at a point where we could only hand it over and kind of then take our hands off it, and not do similarly, like finish one phase but not really continue working on the further phases or any further developments in that product. Similarly, recently also we had to sort of not yeah, I would term it letting go, but it was like the contract was coming to an end and we refused to renew it. Although there was
Hmm.
some work left, we decided not to continue on it and just hand it over to their internal teams, because we felt that it wasn't really, we are doing very different kind of work and again not on the same page. But if I look at a theme, I feel like the larger theme is that even as a very small studio, we want to be on very equitable terms with our clients. And when that does not happen, when I see that the power is shifting or there is a perception that the power lies on the other side and it is not very equitable and we are not seen as partners but just executors of certain work, I
Hmm.
feel that that point when that happens, it starts to go downhill from there for us, and we can't really. We try to bring it back to the same terms, which are more fair in our opinion, more fair to everyone. But if that doesn't happen, then we try to figure out when to end it. Like we kind of then start to get a bit fidgety. Yeah.
So I just have a question for you, right? Like what you just said, that that moment or that point when you start being seen as executors, right? There's a different way of looking at that as well. And I know we have discussed that personally, but I'd like
Yeah.
to get your thought on that, where usually that point also can be seen as a moment of education as well, right? Where the
Mhm.
client may not understand the what value design can actually bring. So that could also be that moment of education to help the client understand that, okay, well, design can do a lot more than just execution. So what's
Yeah.
the difference here in that this kind of scenario where you went, this is not a moment where we can educate, but it's a moment to terminate the relationship.
uh, when it happens quite late in the relationship, at least for us, like
Mm.
3 or 4 months down in an engagement, that's not where that's like you're probably past that point of educating anyone on the value, because you have done that consistently for the previous 3 months. uh, and frankly, the clients had been really happy with the work, but we just kept feeling that it was not. Or someone new comes in, has very little context, but is in a position of power, and they start to influence things very differently from it, the way it had been before. So
Yeah.
when something like things like this happen, we don't see, we now we feel like, okay, you know what, this probably, now they see, they just come to us with ideas, and although we have demonstrated very logically the value of our ideas before, but when someone starts to, with authority, starts to stamp on it, put their stamp on it, you realize that it's probably not, uh, you can even see that this is not going to be a very nice work culture internally. Also for them also, this might not be very great place. So
Right.
that's been our experience, at
I
least
can
in
also
ongoing. Yeah.
I can also imagine that it doesn't happen like the flip of a switch, like during the moment. It's probably not that, oh, today like they're behaving this way, right? It probably happens over a period of time. You
Yeah.
probably are still trying to figure out what's going on,
Yeah.
communicating, and then just get to a point, right?
Yeah. You kind of like, it's gradual, but then it reaches a point where you think, okay, you know what, beyond this probably it may not work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, uh, with your team, what you're also trying to do when all this happens, what you're trying to do is also keep your team in the good spirits, right? Because they can see the same thing, they can see
Yeah,
these things happening. So you're like keeping them on also. Very recently, at some point, I was like, okay, you know what, probably my team members will not be able to take this at all. Like it will start affecting them pretty terribly if we
Mhm.
continued like this, because they are the people owning the execution and the deliverables.
yeah, yeah,
So at that point, we had to say, like, I wouldn't be able to show my face to my team if I continued working on this. If we couldn't pull this back, it would be very hard for me to continue leading this team, because they would just see me as someone like, yeah, okay, they see the money and they see a business and they just go there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
So for us, like it definitely started that way. At least for me, I would say. Maybe not. Maybe us is unfair, but for me in the business, it's definitely started that way. That initially, I just thought things go sour or things get difficult in a project,
yeah,
which they do. I think even when both sides' best intentions are there, things will are bound to, right? Because constructive criticism and friction and all of that stuff, you sometimes you create that. But initially, I thought that, well, things do get difficult, and this is where, so my definition of a successful business was, this is where a business that can pull through this is, that business that can do well, because things will go sour and we have to. It took me a while to realize that actually, yeah, that may be fair, but there's another layer to this. You have to kind of be very clear on your own principles, and when something crosses a line, then you have to let go. I'll kind of mention like two extreme examples, quite extreme. One was a partner. This was someone we had invested in as well, and we started working on it. And it was someone quite senior from the Singapore ecosystem, quite senior, ex-minister. They'd set up a venture, and we were partners in that. And on the first project that we started, I remember working with another designer on my team on that project myself for about like 3 months, and we were so fired up about this project. Like, we weren't waiting for permission from anyone. We were just going. We put up the website for the venture. We were just rolling. We were like, okay, let's get this done. We wanted to get a lot of momentum on this,
Mhm.
and really, really going above and beyond that was expected, because we were treating it really as our own project because we had invested in it. And I remember it was I think a couple of 3 weeks in, we had a bunch of discussions with the project team, and we were looking at branding and looking at some initial research. I remember being in a meeting room where there's a celebrity investor had skipped all meetings till that point and shows up and we present. We've been doing 3 weeks of work, and his attitude, I can summarize in one comment that he made. He said, look, if we really wanted professional level work, design work at this point, we would have hired someone professional. And we're just sitting there and going, what do you mean? Like, we it was just like, I'm just trying to summarize without going into too much details, but that was like his epitome. And like, that was a moment where we knew that this is something really weird going on here. And
Mhm.
within a week to 10 days after that, the whole venture just shut down, because we were like, wait, stop. Like, what do you think our capacity here is? Like, what are we doing here? If you don't see us as a design partner, then we should just not be here, because that's the only role we can play here.
Yeah.
So that was one where the expectations were just so completely different. um, and I think there was a great mismatch of expectations. And we had to make a point that, look, no, we can't continue working here if you are going to say things like that. And the team's been working hard, and you're completely being inconsiderate to the team as well. And then on the other hand, the other example was, this was one of the I would say the largest big IT companies in Singapore, like one of the famous ones. We were working on a project with them for 2 3. It was a 3-month project, but 2 months in, we've been working, and it was a design research project, which then was going to lead to concept testing. And we were doing design research, and we basically got 2 meetings canceled in a week, and we're like, that's funny, what's going on? And then we got called into a meeting with completely new faces, and the person sitting across the table said, okay, where are we? And we showed them where we are, and they're like, no, this needs to be completed in 2 weeks. I'm like, and we were like 4 weeks in. I'm like, that's not atrocious to ask for. I'm like, okay, let's just talk about it. Like, what are you expecting? And this guy was expecting an app delivered design delivered in 2 weeks. I'm like, no, we're not even designing the UI for an app. Like, what are you talking about? And I just escalated very quickly within 2 days, to the point of, we were like, we have to stop working with you guys, because there's no, like, this was, we were really, really gobsmacked. We're like, what the hell just happened? Like, we were working on a project, and now where did all the people go that we were working with? And so we ended up meeting with the original product manager, and he's like, yeah, someone else is taking over. You need to deal with them. And we're like, what the hell's going on? But it went so bad that they refused to pay us, and we had to threaten legal action. In the end, that didn't happen. Like, we would have gotten nothing out of if legal action had to be pursued, but we, again, had to make a point. Um, but it got really, really bad, to the point of, us for the first time thinking we have to pursue legal action. Like, it was literally this big IT company just throwing their weight around. They were just like, oh yeah, ignore them now. Like, they're just a small studio, ignore them. Don't need to care about them. They stopped responding to our calls, stopped meeting with us, and we were like, you haven't made payments. And they're like, payments for what? You haven't delivered the work. Like, what the hell? So
Yeah, I
that was
think
very extreme.
I think as a small studio, you face that a lot if you're working with large companies, because there is such a big difference in how fast you can take decisions, how fast you can execute things, how fast you expect the other side to respond as well. Like, given that we are a lean team, uh, we are so much faster than some of our clients, and at that point of time, also we have so much better context in every meeting, like, because we have sat through all conversations. Like, one very recent example, and an organization which is fairly large, and we are struggling with them simply because there is this huge communication gap between who we are speaking with and who the decision makers are, and what the decision makers expect. How do they deal with, like, vendors, and the challenge is that the middle managers who are trying to balance both the side are stuck. They just don't know what to do about it, because at the end of the day, they also have a job to keep. They also have the organization interest. They have to follow what the management is telling, and things like that. So I kind of sympathize with the middle managers and all those, but at the same point of time, that pushes us to, okay, let me try a little bit more, let me try a little more, let me ask them to get us in a meeting with the management and all those things. And in the meeting with the management happens, it's an absolutely, like, it the conversation is more like, you can say what you want, but here is what we have, and this is what we want, how we want things to be. And that, at that point of time, I think it really impacts you as a small studio, where you're like, hey, we are not being valued enough, and we don't want to be treated as uh, as a as a commodity vendor. It's not that we are trying to give, we are trying to give a very customized service for our clients. It has to be a lot more symbiotic, a lot more it has to feel like we are both in it together, kind of a thing. And when that does not happen, and when the bigger organizations throw your weight around, then that goes really bad. And yeah, this is like in I mean, this kind of brings me to the question that I had lined up after this, which is like, what are the things that makes one want to let a client go? Like, this is one of the things, like the things that we just described. What else are the things that that come to your mind that makes you want to not continue a project? Tejas?
Sorry.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. Like these kind of things definitely, where you if you're working with an organization which is even doesn't even need to be one of the like really a few thousand people companies, right? Even a smaller company, but where there is the people you are working with cannot influence all the company policies, all the legal and everything that happens in the company. And also at the when they are not the decision makers themselves, but the decision is going to come from people who you are not directly in touch with. When these things happen, definitely it just creates such a disconnect where you empathize with the people you are working with because you know the remit of their power and not,
Mhm.
but you can empathize with them, you can like you can sympathize with them, you cannot empathize with them. You can't put yourself in their shoes because in your role you are running a company and you're tweaking the rules as you need, right? So you're just not able to you're like, okay, this is how it should be, and you're probably right also, but the company takes much longer to change that to something else. And yeah, when we see that, like I think you captured it very very well. Like that's what I meant by the equitable terms, where you feel that
Mhm.
you are a partner, you want to be valued as a partner and not just a vendor.
I think
Yeah.
I've been I think I was quite lucky that when I was running the studio, the partners that I had within the studio, other senior leadership team,
Mhm.
um, were very experienced. So our CEO, the guy who kind of brought me in and gave me the charge of the company, was an ex. He was a sales guy basically, right? He's like 10, 10, 15 years older than me, very experienced, uh, and he was really really good at dealing with difficult situations, turning difficult situations into positive opportunities, like exactly they just the kind of stuff you were talking about, right? Like I wouldn't know how to deal with those situations. I'm like, things are just going sour, right? They just come to a point where, and that's the point he would go, wait, hold on, let's try and figure this out. And it wasn't about us trying to figure out how we would work with this difficult client, but literally about how do we figure out the situation. And he would find a way to talk to the right people. And so there was a big client that we had, there the project owner on the other side, we got it was a very big project, and we'd been working on it for like 6 7 months. We were close to release. There were lots of problems, lots of issues, and we were really struggling to get this release out. And this one project owner just completely started losing their mind, like to the extent of screaming at our junior staff. And like the first time we saw it, we were like, wait. So we just were like, okay, wait, are you okay? What's going on? Really try to have that conversation with him. But then it happened 2 times again, and we were just like, okay, that's it. We just till this person's taken off this project, we're just not gonna. And what we were asking for, which was like, well, you need to take this person off. We were working with the government. In the government, that is basically bad. Like getting someone taken off a project can be really, really bad. Like it's the end of your career kind of thing. That's how it was pitched to us. So we're like, but that doesn't mean that we can continue working with this person. So we have to cancel the project. We need to remove the project. And he came in and he made that, like, he had those conversations which resulted in this person moving to a different place, but in the nicest way possible. He was just, this person was under a lot of pressure, moved to a different place, got given 3 months of leave, and then, whatever, like, I think he was better after that. But I would not have been able to navigate that. I would just not have been able. For me, it would have been the end of the project. Whereas he came
Mhm.
and he said, "Look, we just need to talk to the right people, make them see what's going on, and we could make this work." So, so there's, I mean, there it's kind of relative as well. Like, I'm not trying to say that every situation can be like this, but I've also realized that I was lucky that there were a lot of situations that got diffused or got figured out because it was a people situation. Most of the time it's just a people situation, and there was someone who I knew, who I had, who knew how to handle this better. um so there have been situations like this, but most of them, most of those kind of scenarios where we've had to let clients go were either like the two examples where I gave earlier, where it was just mismatch of communication or clients just being completely unreasonable. Which, to be honest, were not a lot. Most of the other situations were just people problems. um, One other example I have is very, very similar to this example that I just gave. Someone, project owner, was being unreasonable. Um, a project client that we were working with, we were really, really close to the project team, but they had an external consultant who was working on this project. And this person, I think, Sovik, this is going back to your middle manager sympathy, empathy part, right? Like,
Mhm.
this person was a consultant who was in charge of kind of running the project. And I think he was under a lot of pressure. The project team was very pally with us. They were always talking very well with us, but I think that team was putting a lot of project on pressure on this person sitting in the middle. I remember him coming to our office for a meeting and just started screaming at the team. It's not like Singapore doesn't have people who just scream all the time. That's the impression I'm giving. But it was the same situation, and we just had to stop the meeting and just have to go. Like, I had to go to the guy. Like, we can't continue this way. Do you want to go have a cup of coffee? We can try. Like, what's going on? He just wasn't interested, and he basically just, like, if we would have lost the project or we would have had to stop the project, but he basically just quit the next day. So a lot of times it just becomes these people problems that are happening, and not knowing how to deal with the stress or the pressure. When that becomes the case, then I think it becomes really, really hard to handle projects. um, Otherwise it's quite clear. I don't think, luckily, we've not had a situation where anyone's kind of misbehaved or done anything like that, which I have heard stories of clients being let go because someone misbehaved in whatever fashion.
Mhm.
um, Actually, there's one more scenario that comes to my mind that, again, it was early days of the project. Like, just after kicking off the project, we realized that the project that we were going to work on actually was just a front for a very, very dodgy, illegal kind of thing. And we realized, actually, after that, the guy who we'd been dealing with wasn't actually the project owner. The project owner had been was wanted in America, and he'd been given
Whoa.
exile in Singapore. And this guy had this huge mansion. I remember being so impressed driving up to his office was in his house, which was a mansion with horses walking around in his garden. Singapore, you don't have a lot of
That's
space. Like, you need,
Singapore. Wow.
yeah, 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 absolutely crazy rich Asian style type of thing. But Singapore does have a lot of crazy rich Asians, right? So I was like, okay, fine, cool. But we just realized, like, within a week or 10 days after the project, that it all just uncovered. Like, as soon as we started kicking off the project, the other person showed up. We were talking about, like, who is this guy? I just looked into it. He was wanted in US because he'd committed fraud for selling personal information on people, and these projects that he was trying to build. Immediately we were just like connected the dots. We're like, shit, we're building this so that he can mine this kind of data, and this is what's going to happen. And so we had to kill that project. That was just unethical. Completely
Yeah.
unethical.
I'll add a few other things, other reasons where uh, I won't say it has always reached to letting a client go, but it has reached pretty close to letting client go, even if, and in some cases, it has resulted in letting a client go. Uh, One of them is I'd taken some notes before the call. Personality conflict.
Hmm.
Now, this is not the case of middle managers. It's a case of having another small team, not a large one. We are dealing directly with the founder, so there is a good communication from the like, or at least good power to take decisions, how to navigate things. But there was a significant communication and expectation breakdown, which, to the best of my abilities, I can just point to personality conflict between us and an individual. And I won't say that the expectations on the other side is unreasonable. I won't say that our expectations was unreasonable. I just felt that it was incompatible at a certain point in time, and we realized that it like the feedback and all came in a certain way with a certain level of expectation, which we did not expect it to go that way. It happened a couple of weeks, and then yeah, slowly it just got wound down. The project got killed from kind of both sides. I'll also talk about that a little bit in a later part, where how can we approach these kinds of endings. The other example that comes to my mind is something very close to your thing, Nav. Not obviously the same reason, but I just boil it down to, there is something that you learn about the other side which you don't feel morally right to be associated with, basically. So it can be on the lines of what you just said. It can be on or for very different on very different for very different reasons as well. But there comes a time when, like, yeah, this crosses a line, and I don't think we should be associated, and we should not continue this working with this organization or people. Then there are payment issues, obviously, which is like a very low hanging fruit in terms of ending relationships, that not getting paid, not just on time, but either not getting paid at all. Like, to a point that you lose it, like, wait, we were supposed to get paid a month back, now it's even longer, we're still not getting paid. Pause the project, wait for the payment to come, still doesn't come, and things like that. And it has also happened that after we ended the work and things like that, sometime later, uh, again wanted to do more work with us, and we said, like, no, clear our last payment, basically. And we managed to get our last payment cleared in that when the next phase of requirement was needed. We started working again. Terrible decision, we shouldn't have. Definitely regret resuming that relationship. Then one more point that I had was that something that hasn't complete resulted in client, like, relationships ending, but it has definitely taken us to very close, which is not respecting boundaries. uh in like, at what time you engage, what time you call, what channels do you use to communicate, like, so we kind of want to keep WhatsApp away from work communication as much as possible. It's not 100% possible just because of the ubiquity of this platform. Maybe starting conversation, but we at least try to make sure very early in our conversations we set this expectation that no conversations on WhatsApp. We are using this tool for our communication, we'll be using emails. We don't expect we don't expect unplanned calls or unscheduled calls and things like that. And for a little while you kind of ignore it, like, but and then you ask that, please don't do it, it's not going well and all. And after an elongated period, if that thing just doesn't stay, I think it can go in a trajectory where we'll say that, like, we want to end this relationship, because it's not allowing us the enough personal space when we don't want to work and things like that. So far this has not been a reason why any client relationship has ended for us, but I can totally see that this could be a reason if it stretches beyond that tipping point.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. That those are certain things that you need to take a stand on right from the beginning of the project, right? So if you have, let's say, you have a policy or you believe in like after 6 p.m., 7 p.m., I'm not going to respond. You need to behave like that from day one. That's what I believe, right? During sales as well, everything. Like I've always been like in the sales, you can't set certain expectation and then the other
And
teams have
change
to
it
change,
later.
right? So we just had that policy that we try not to. Um, But we kind of muddled with it like in a few different ways. Sometimes we had like, if I was running the project, I would say, okay, I will respond, nobody else on the team. If you get a call after, if there's a message on the group after 6 or 7, it's my responsibility. If I don't respond, you don't need to worry about it. The only thing is, if no one's responded at first thing in the morning, check client messages and just respond to them if we have the discussion. But I've definitely had those moments as well where clients have just, yeah, relentlessly just like keep sending messages, a few nice reminders, and then just I start ignoring. And as soon as you start ignoring, you know this is not going to go well. So then I would be like, okay, now I need to have a conversation about this because I don't want to ignore it. The longer you ignore it, the worse it's going to get.
Hmm.
And yeah, definitely, I can totally empathize with you. So I've had those so many times where you kind of
I
go like, this
actually
is not going to end well. This is going in the wrong direction. This
Yeah,
person's
I
not
actually
understanding.
missed one of the points, which I think is also very important. The example where we offered to end the project, and it from that point of time it went better and it worked out fine.
Mhm.
Was a case where we felt we were in the wrong. So we offered
Mm.
to end the project not because the client was in the wrong, but we felt we were in the wrong and we felt that we should not continue. It could be because of performance, it could be because error of judgment on our part. Whatever it was, it took us to a position that, hey, I don't feel good about like still carrying on this project despite us having done something that was not great.
Mhm.
So that was the place from where we had approached that, let's offer to end the thing as well as we could, but it was not kind of accepted, and it from there it turned better. So that was another reason what I had noted, which is it goes in like it puts the blame to us on us rather than on our
Yeah.
clients. Okay.
I had a question. Like,
Yeah, go on.
so these are some of these are like very easy, sound like very easy places to say, okay, we have to end the project because it's just gotten to a point like, yeah, okay, it becomes like clear after a point that, okay, this just can't go on. I also have a question like, what are some of those, like, can you think of some examples where you couldn't, like, you could look back and go, I couldn't bring myself to end the project. Maybe I should have.
Yeah,
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 that was going to be my question as well. Like I was going to ask the same. Were there cases where you continued and you brought it to its end, but then you
Yeah.
look back and you're like, should have ended on week two.
Yeah.
yeah.
Any
I mean, it
examples
kind
like
of connects well with the next question I had also, which is like, when is the right time to do such a thing, and therefore,
mm,
uh, kind of what are the times when you're still not doing it, and kind of answer for that as well. So probably Tejas, you can just start on this. What are the times when you feel that it's not the right time to do it yet? You just push through, or when is it that you feel that, yeah, it is the right time?
uh, yeah, so now uh, we also look at like different stages, kind of with stronger values. We look at different stages, and even at contract level, when everything else works, but there's something that we don't agree with, and we are just, like, it's not going to go ahead. So it's not really letting a it's letting a client go. It's not firing a client, but it's letting a client go because it looked like it was just uh, pretty much there. Like it was very good to go, but you couldn't agree on certain terms. Beyond that, I'm as a personally, I'm very I accept more, like as in like if there are a few things here happening here and there, I kind of uh, view that as either personality traits or just differences in opinions, which do not necessarily need to lead to a kind of separation sort of thing. I'm like, yeah, okay, we have different way of looking at things, but I still value the way of presenting those points and the way of how you disagree. Like how you disagree matters a lot more to me than what the disagreement is about. Uh, if we see that the disagreement is coming more from emotional points, which and or say a point of authority, then uh, kind of any rationalization behind it, then it becomes a problem for me from the word go. I would still kind of try to live with that a little bit and kind of just see the things through until and unless I we really feel that the mismatch in expectation is just too high. We have been on projects, and we because we charge by time, this comes even as a even bigger shock to us that we have sat on projects for like 3 weeks and with no one in client team even replying back to our feedback queries or kind of things that they needed to make decisions on. And it, that's when we are making a lot of money for absolutely doing nothing. But that's also a very painful part in any consultancy's journey, because you are just wasting time not doing any work that you could show the world, which is
Mm-hmm.
another very big point for us now. Like, we really want to talk about our work. If you have a clause in your uh, contract which says we couldn't talk about the work ever in perpetuity, that
Mm-hmm.
becomes a no-go for us, because we have burnt
Yeah.
our fingers with things where like you can't. Someone said you could talk about the work, and later, like, large organization, they say, we have a policy, or policy, you
Hmm.
can't talk about the work or our relationship ever. And we are like, you know uh, for an agency, that's any project is not, there are many things to it, right? You want to do the work, you want to get paid for it, so it's doing great work, sustaining, but also it needs to play some role in bringing the future work. So things like this, when we say, it just it's not going to work out, just too many delays, people. I even feel not really, this is probably just me, but I don't feel as an agency too valued if someone has enough money to just throw at us. And
Oh.
it's not, so it's not in terms of weekly rates or something. But if we are just sitting, like I said, if we are sitting without work for a month or so with no plans, or just things that, because the team has not been able to gather feedback, the partner team is just not spending enough time, they have the kind of money to throw at us, which will give them that power to not value us also. It's
Hmm.
like, yeah, we are paying you, right? So what's the problem? That to me is a problem. So
This is
if we,
fascinating because this can be
yeah,
really complex to navigate. That okay, you want to work with clients who have a lot of money so that you can get paid well, but you also don't want them to have too much money that they don't value your work.
I think the later is not having too much money. It's more of an attitude problem, right? It's an
Okay.
attitude that says, we have the money, we are paying it to them, and we can afford to just keep them around, whether we have
Hmm.
some work or not. Now,
Hmm.
that's a different situation when you already have a roadmap of what the work is going to be, and you are just waiting to get started. Like a lot of projects, when they
Hmm.
get started, it starts slow. You kind of
Slow.
expect that. When you are waiting for feedback and stuff like that, and it just takes like, okay, this week, then it's say, okay, no, maybe by next week, maybe now 3 weeks have gone, then you start to feel that you are spare tire in their trunk, and you don't want to be a spare tire.
Right. So, so now, what? When is the right time to do it, and what are the times when you feel that
Well,
you've not taken the decision to let a client go?
I think right time is it's hard to define. Like as in, right time is always a time when you realize that this is not going to work for whatever reason.
Hmm.
I really can't say when that can happen. It can happen towards the end of the project, beginning of the project, peak of the project. Um, uh, Usually, I think in general, I was just thinking about this earlier that I think we're usually more positive at the beginning of a project
Hmm.
as a studio as well, because you started and you have more energy to put in and kind of build that relationship, because you're also building the relationship. And after a while, you kind of need the project to go into this flow state where you need things to be done, and you know things need to move. And if at that point things start changing drastically without us knowing why, things just being thrown around without really us being given the chance to understand, um, that I think usually is a signal that okay, things something's wrong's going on, and some hard conversations need to happen. That hasn't always resulted in us losing or stopping working with the client. It just means hard conversations, right? At that point, most of the time it gets sorted if you choose to have that hard conversation. But a lot of times, I think it happens that you just don't. Um, so I think when it really just matters on when that scenario happens, or when you get to know of something, or when someone does something that's not appropriate. um What was the other question? Sorry, I was really lost in this thought.
No, my main question was around when is the right time, and what are examples of when you felt that no, it's not the time to still let go a client, and you still carried on some
Yeah.
example.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Okay. So I'll start. Actually, I'll give it a reverse example, kind of what Tejas was talking about. That we had, like, I can think of one, actually, a couple of clear scenarios where a client started behaving in a certain way. Not started. Client was behaving in a certain way, which we kind of knew isn't compatible with us, but we almost ignored it or chose to ignore it during the sales process because we were trying to get the project. That's definitely happened. So clients who are just messaging us late in the evening,
Hmm.
and over time I realized there are certain qualities in a person that I know are just going to be incompatible as we go down this route. And I think definitely over time I got better at looking at that. Us as a team got better at kind of recognizing that and being okay with going, wait, like we need to have this chat, like we need to see how this person's going to behave, or the product owner is going to behave, or the client's going to behave. Things like sometimes we're not being paid, and even during the sales pitch we saw people, clients just going quiet for 2 weeks and suddenly coming back and saying, oh, can you come back tomorrow and do this presentation again, and just completely, like, shutting off and then coming back. And so unreliable responses, people not respecting boundaries, a lot of those things we saw during the sales process, for example. And then over time, we are like, we should have realized that we should have entered this project earlier. There's also
Hmm.
been, like, in retrospect, a couple of projects where I think I felt the pain less than some of my team members in the project. But now in retrospect, I'm like, that wasn't really worth it. Even at that point, if I could really understand what my team members were going through, I wouldn't have been able. I think I would have probably started the conversation of ending the project. I'll give one example. I only found out how much pain a project caused a team member after I met her a year after she'd left the company, right?
Wow.
And we were talking about it. And at that point, I'm like, if that thing is still so much on her mind, I just couldn't grasp how much it was causing, like, it was stressing her out at that point. And a lot of it was because of some issues on the client side where the client was just not respecting boundaries, messaging at midnight, messaging early in the morning. Did you get that done? Da, 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 da.
Hmm.
Of course, there were problems on our side, right? We should have. Our problem was we didn't set up processes, or we didn't have enough communication amongst ourselves to recognize that that happened. Um, but yeah, I think in retrospect, like, also in retrospect, it's easy to connect the dots.
Yeah, yeah. You're always looking back,
Yeah,
and then you think that that could have gone differently.
yeah,
Like in our case, uh, I think we had lesser patience for things in the early on when we were running the studio. uh, in the sense that we were quick to judge. We were quick to, yeah, this is a person we can work with, or this is an organization we don't want to work with, and things like that. But I think as time has progressed, I have realized that there is an element of our work which is a service agency, and there is an element of the thing that you had started off with, that you have to educate the client, you have to this is a part of our job, this is a part of our work. I mean, we don't want to be treated as like a customer support kind of people as well, but we don't have to be at the opposite extreme as well, where we are absolutely not accepting anything, and how we can improve it, and so on. So usually we have a tendency to be very patient, give it time, uh, talk about an issue with the client if something repeats. And I think only one, if it drags on for far too long, that we have gotten fatigued, like we have lost the will to talk about it with the client, or because we have done talking, we have done communicating.
yeah.
At that point of time, it's, you're close to a burnout, like you want the project to end. You and the only time I think we would generally let go is where we don't see a natural end to the project, that we are not 2 weeks away. If it is 2 weeks away, we'll still ignore it. We'll just, let's just we'll just do whatever the client says. Let's get to a closure, collect our payments, and say we'll not do it again. but
Mm.
but if we don't have an end of project in sight, say we are in the middle of the project and we're like, this is going to go on for a few months or few many weeks, at that point of time, and we have already talked about it, and something has escalated, then I think that is when we get pushed to say that, hey, uh, let's end the thing. Which also brings me to a question: how do you approach this kind of a thing? How do you do it gracefully? How do you introduce this when you feel that the time is right? How should one, in your minds, approach this conversation? How have you done it, Nav?
Um, I don't know, very emotionally at the beginning of the career, at the beginning of my days, where, like you said, very short tempered, very binary in my reactions, that it's
Yeah,
either this way or that way. That's it.
that
There's
way.
no
Yep.
middle ground,
Yep.
which I can tell you wasn't the right thing to do. So, like, I think one of the things has probably been, again, learnings from Mohan, who was kind of like my mentor and the CEO, was that disconnecting the emotion from the person, or the, like, what I'm feeling, is it for the person or the situation, right? And really kind of, there's that framework that I haven't had to use it for a while because of whatever reason. It's kind of like, but the RSVP framework, have you heard of that? The
No, I would like to hear
reaction.
about it.
um, Hold on. I was actually, oh, I was writing about it. But I mean, while I look for it, I think the main thing in my mind there is, yeah, I really have to disconnect and say, okay, what is driving? What is the emotion that I'm feeling right now that's driving me to act in whatever way? Like, I want to cancel the project, and what's the practical impact of it on not just me, because emotion is me. Practical impact is on everyone around me as well.
Hmm.
So kind of thinking of that, and then just approaching it from there and going that, okay, how can I have this conversation minimally, like in a nice way? Even I learned this from a client, actually. That, remember that project that I was mentioning, the really large company who was just treating
Hmm.
us like a disregard the small studio. That project ended with them not paying us, and us kind of thinking and kind of saying, hey, we might need to pursue legal action. um, and they kind of just dragged on it. We didn't want to press legal charges and stuff, and it was just not going to work for us. We're a small studio. We didn't want to go that route. It would
Yep.
just be too much pressure and all of that. Um, so we kind of, when we're like, okay, let's just ignore it for a couple of weeks. It's just taking up too much of our mental bandwidth as well. We'll come back to it in a couple of weeks and see what's happening. When we did, the one of the new, very senior guys who'd taken over, who was partly responsible for saying that you need to wrap this up in 2 weeks and stuff, he said, Nav, why don't we meet for a coffee and talk about it? And I went there, and I remember this so clearly. I went there and I was really fired up, almost like twitching to the point, right? Because I was like really angry. I was like, how can you do this? And this guy's like, so I'm like, he's just going to sit me down and just tell me, probably like, you threaten legal action. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. I was ready for that kind of conversation. We sat down and he said, how are you? I was like, yeah, I'm good. He's like, can we talk about not work for 15 minutes before we talk about work? Because both of us, when we start talking about work, I know what you're feeling. I know what I'm feeling. It's not going to be positive, right? Can we just try to talk about something else? And he just disarmed me completely. And I just started talking about, he told me he had just moved to Singapore. He was American 3 months ago to work for this company. And he had two daughters. And we just spoke about life for 15 minutes, to the point that when we actually started talking about it, we weren't angry. We just really could approach it from this point of, okay, what do we do practically? And he said, look, I know that the money, the amount, isn't a big deal, but there's politics internal. That's why this has happened. And da 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 da. And basically, I think they owed us. It wasn't a lot of money. I think it was like $30,000 for the overall project. It was actually not that much money, and I think we ended up getting, I think, like 20,000 out of that. And it was that, without any more stress, without having to kind of fight anyone, and walking away shaking hands. And I caught up with him for a coffee, I think like 2 years later, when he left that company working somewhere else. Like, I really thought that was the best outcome of that thing. So, like, just disassociating the emotion from the scenario and just being able to approach it properly. So I just found that RSVP thing that I was talking to someone about recently, and it was, RSVP stands for resist the urge to react. First of all, when you find yourself in a situation where it's like, what am I going to do? R is resist the urge to react. S is segregate the person from the action. Like, someone's done something, you remove the person.
Hmm.
And the third one is really key, which is view from the top, basically meaning that, okay, stop, just don't react. First of all, think this person reacting this way, but it's not the person, that's his reaction and this is the person. Now really zoom out and think of, okay, what's the big impact of this, what's the best thing that could come out of this, what how can this be resolved? It's not going to be resolved by me getting out everything that I want,
Hmm.
likely, right? Is there a chance? Maybe you have to think that way. And then you put it all together, and then you do the next step. The first thing is resist the urge to react, which kind of what
Hmm.
he did for me, right? He said, let's not talk about that. Let's just talk about something else for 15 minutes. Just disconnected. Um, so very, I think, kind of meta, but I like we were talking about it, right? A lot of time it just boils down to emotions and people problems and personality disconnects and all of that. And you can't. I think my old opinion, initial opinion, used to be this is attacking my identity because I believe in these things and this person's making me do this. Is attacking my identity. And my reaction to that was kind of trying to overpower the other person with my identity to make them understand what I'm standing for. But what I was trying to do is I was trying to alter their identity now. I'm like, I can't win by making someone else see. I can make them see my point of view, but I'm not going to make them see why I think I am right and why they think they are wrong. I can make them see my point of view, and if they change their thought process at that point, that's okay.
Hmm.
But that's probably the best you can do. Um,
Right. Hmm.
yeah, I think
Uh,
that's the best way to approach it.
Now you're talking about your mentor, who was also
Hmm.
the book CEO,
Yeah, yeah.
and how he stepped into certain situations and he turned them around or gave the benefit of looking at them differently. Do you
Yeah.
feel, in addition to his wisdom, his distance from the entire situation might have helped uh, change the outcome of or change the direction of that entire situation?
I think his distance. Okay, so I think you bring up a really good point. I'd not thought of it that way, but I think that is. I think Tejas, you're absolutely right. That helps you be at a distance just because you're not involved in it.
Yeah.
He's also the person who his approach to most of this stuff is like that. He's like whatever you say and do, if you're reacting in a certain way, that doesn't make me, you know, think of you in a certain way. I won't react to what you're reacting. I'm going to disassociate them and kind of think in two different ways. So he's very good at not reacting from an emotional point, right place. So I'll give you an example. This is something I mentioned on the podcast earlier at one point as well. He's the one who gave me the advice that when I took over the studio and I didn't take a leave for so long, he said, Nat, go away for 2 weeks, nothing's going to burn down. I'm like, how can you say that? Like, you're saying, I'm like, I'm running the place. He's like, just go. And nothing burned down. When I came back, he's like, this, I'm like, nothing burned down. Yeah, like there were a few missed emails and clients and calls and this and that. But at the end of the day, he's like, nothing drastic's gonna happen.
Yeah.
It's about just if I can make that, oh shit, I came back 3 client emails, they had a meeting, I didn't go to that. Da, da, da. But if you just approach it from, it's fine, right? Yeah, it's fine. It's okay. We can deal with
Yeah.
it. We can figure it out. So I think he just has this knack where I went to him to get some advice last year when I decided to take a sabbatical and I was thinking of what I want to do next. His advice was very much on these lines. He's like, your next job or whatever move you do next, don't go from that emotional place. Think practically, and then think how is that gonna have the bigger impact and all of that stuff. It was really, really, that's for a different conversation. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that is what you said. I think I hadn't thought of it that way. That just physically and tactically, just not being involved in that conversation,
Right. Yeah.
maybe helped
Yeah.
them give me that advice.
So, Souvik, same question for you, because now you don't uh, execute the designs and you handle the business more. Do you see
Yeah.
that also impacting you not being part of the, like, in the thick of things, or not being the person who's uh, owning the execution of outcomes, but being the business person? Does that, you see the same thing?
I think this is in addition to the fact that what Nav says, that some people have the personality in which they can stay calm, they can stay detached to this thing. That is a great personality to have, which I am trying to grow more and more. So that's one side of it. But the fact that you are not in the war zone, it helps you make better strategic decisions or tactical decisions, whatever that might be. So I do believe that not being in the mix of it, in the thick of it, where you have the thing to deliver, and you are not in a your communication is breaking down with the other person and things like that. And one of the things that we use at Mirange is that whenever such a thing happens at the execution team level and the stuff, then I try to be the external person coming in, and not just having the conversation with the client, but also having a conversation with the team, that look, you can't, we shouldn't do it this way, look, let's just step back. And and and, and obviously I'm at a privileged position there, that I can think calmly because I'm not in between that. And the reverse sometimes happens when there are other business strategy related decisions and things like that, or sales conversations and all. There, like, if there is a case where in a sales point in time I have to say no, and we don't want to work in this project at all, I think I need that little bit of a validation coming in from the co-founder Prateek, to say that, yeah, let this go, right? It's not that you have lack of, why are you like so like, and at some point in time you get so emotionally attached to the thing that you're doing. So if you're creating you're doing your design work, you're attached to that product. If you're making trying to make a sale, you're attached to the journey that you have had for the last 2 months. Like, I've put my 2 months trying to get it to this place, and you don't want to let it go. So I do believe that when the external person comes in out there, then kind of balances things out, and helps in it. And it goes both ways, not just that I'm helping out the execution team, but Pratik is helping out in my work as well in that way.
I think what Sovik you were saying there about trying to grow to be that, the what you explained as calm in those kind of situations, right? um I totally agree, like totally empathize with that, totally in line with that thought, that I've been, I think, in some ways trying to do the same. And it's kind of like, this conversation is making me think of, you were describing the word war. Like, if you're not in the war zone,
Hmm.
you can make these decisions, right? And I think, at the risk of this conversation becoming a bit philosophical, but what you were talking about with that personality, the context of that personality, was that you can be inside the war, but you don't have to, like, it doesn't have to influence you. Like, kind of going into that stoicism way of thinking,
Hmm.
that these
Hmm.
are all things happening around you. You can choose whether they affect you or not. And if
Hmm.
you can control that, then it allows you to kind of behave in a much, much more, what we're discussing, sensible way.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Uh,
I I've tried to, whenever I've been approaching these kinds of things where I have to end a client relationship or end a project, I've often found myself like beat around the bush, use these side tricks, and not do direct confrontation and things like that. So I have not reached a point where or a place where you just mentioned now, to get in a coffee table and say, let's talk about non-work. I someday I'll probably achieve that level of coolness and calmness, but I often find myself uh, use, like, in order to not get confrontational as well, I might just go for, like, at the sales point of time, quote a very high money, that just let it go. Just say that you're not available and let it go. Let it not be a place where we are trying to explain them, or we are trying to tell them that this is why we don't like you or anything like that.
yeah, yeah.
So I try to avoid it, these things. And in many cases, the beginning of our conversation to end a project happens through email, where I try to write my thoughts down and then send it to the client, saying that, hey, we feel this has happened and all. And I've seen it go both ways. I've seen it go in a way where it has worked, and it has been a good closure. I have also seen it go in a way where it has actually escalated the situation. Say that, how could you write this? Kind of thing. I just don't know what is the right way to approach it yet, and I think I'm still learning that space. But I'm usually not a in very 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 rare situation would I be like absolutely blatant to say that, no, we don't want to work with you.
Mm,
We might just say that, no, we are not available, just we're not available. Let's, like, just avoid
yeah.
that conversation.
I
Tejas,
wanted
how do
to
you? Yeah,
Sorry, I
no.
want to pick on one thing, just highlight one thing that you said, which is you quote a high price to a client because you want them to go away. I realized that's never a good way to make a client go away. Like most of the like, okay, not never, but that's not a good way
Yeah,
because we see that case where the client comes back. So okay, I'm like, what the hell?
I yeah, I remember the same thing came up in how to choose a project
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
yeah, like what if you
yeah.
said yes and there was just
Yeah,
like
I
still
I have
female.
not done this recently. I think I've got a little wiser. I used to do that earlier, but I agree with this point maybe, and I think I'm getting more and more comfortable with the fact that let me just say it. Let me just be honest. I just need to learn how to approach this, how to say it. Need to learn this thing of can I disarm the other side and also myself in that conversation, not be emotionally charged. But once I get there, I think I would feel better to say that hey, I was fully honest and transparent rather than beat around the bush and escape from the situation, kind of a thing. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
think I'm there yet though. Tejas, how do you approach
Is-
these conversations?
Uh, so sometimes it's pretty visible. Like when things start to go wrong a week or two before you actually end it, and then
Hmm.
during the 2 weeks, separation seems to be like, or going your own way seems to be become a natural end to this. It sort of everyone's kind of warmed up to the idea or become aware of the idea that this is not going to go very well together. So it's not a very quick and dirty sort of an end. uh, Sometimes it's just a natural end of a phase when you say, you know what, this phase is done, but we probably cannot continue helping you with this any further. So let's not go forward with this. We try to make it very easy, and like Nav said, if we could do it on a call, if we can get a FaceTime and explain it over a call, that's even better because uh, with your voice and other things, you could probably do this a lot better than over an email. Like over an email, it might even feel like a uh,
Hmm.
little abrupt or unexpected kind of thing, or insulting to some people.
Yeah.
It's a bigger challenge for me because I'm an email person. Like
Yeah.
I'm not a one-to-one talk person at all. I need my time to think through things and then put it down in words. And once I do that, then if I go to a face-to-face meeting, it would just feel like I'm ratifying something off screen because it's just a script that I'm reading out. So it's a
yeah.
hard thing for me personally to do it in person, but I try to do it in person because it just makes it easy.
Yeah, like this was like again one of those things that in our sales team we would say because Mohan was kind of mentoring that is like you always the default has to be meet someone and
Yeah.
then you think of the next best thing. Don't start with email and then think maybe I'll do a phone call and then think no, it has to be the reverse of that. Like, but again, I totally understand. Like, it's not easy to do always. It just feels like
Yeah,
just
it's
send an
quite
email and
quite tough to be in the position in front of the person trying to say that hey, I want to
yeah.
like just end this. Like it that's a scary
I have a question.
state.
I
Yeah.
have a topic that I wanted to talk about. I don't know
Yeah.
where how's time check. I don't know where we are.
About 10 minutes we should try to
Okay,
wind up.
perfect, perfect. Okay, so I have another thing, right? We've been talking. Today's been like a little bit of a difficult conversation because it's just like you're talking about all those things when then things didn't work out, right? And it's
Yeah.
not very positive either.
Yeah.
But for anyone who's running a studio, right? Like one of the big fears in a situation like this is what's going to happen to my business if I start letting go of clients,
Yeah.
right? That's definitely. I remember that was the fear I had. I was like, it's so hard to get projects. Why would I let go of a project, right? So just a little bit of pain. Maybe we just need to go through it, right? So I wanted to talk about like what's been the impact of that. So letting go of clients, like for
Mhm.
someone who's let's say starting off a studio or running a studio, this is the big fear. So like from our experiences, like Tejas, for example, for you, what's been the impact of letting go of a client on the business and on you, on the team?
On businesses definitely has an impact. Like you lose money, definitely you lose money. You kind of it's like you're taking one end of the stick, but you're pulling the entire stick, right? Like the other end's
Yeah.
going to come with it. So business is definitely one thing that gets impacted. On other hand, in the team, so two things are really moral wise and team spirit wise, two things become very apparent when you say no to anything, basically, and in this case no to continuing a relationship. It really ends in a very high, a very emotional high in the beginning, because it's like you, things were bottled up and they just open. Now there's a calm. Initially there is a calm. Then you go through a different wave of emotion where you're like, could it have been salvaged? Could we do things a little bit differently, where it could be, uh, we could probably just be still working on that thing. So after high, you kind of come down. You are thinking about it a little bit more rationally, but still very emotionally charged. Uh, and but you definitely see the signs in the team that they have, because the relationship was such that at least certain members of the team are in a much better mental position not to just deal with the client on day to day basis. So that happens. Then you start looking for a new project, because now you have a huge hole in your calendar and you want to find something for it. You start doing that. A little bit after that, probably a month or so or even longer, I, I'm personally in a much more rational place to judge the entire situation. What could be done differently, which is the real phase of learning for me, at least. These are the signs that we saw earlier that we could have avoided. These are the things we could have done differently very early on to move this in certain direction. And even then, there are times when you just stand by. You still stand by your decision, but you could still stand by it uh, logically. You're still like, you know what, having said all of this, having, even after thinking that these are the things we could have done differently, I still stand by the decision that it couldn't have gone in any other direction. For us, the reverse is true. It's something like, I really like what you said earlier. uh, it's the thought of, should have fired them earlier. Like, we should have ended this much earlier than we continued it for. I think that happens more often than uh, s- any other emotion. So that's my feeling. Like, definitely business takes a hit, but uh, personally, I feel much better after letting something like that go, because it's I feel it strengthens me as a business owner, and hopefully my team also looks at me differently after that. Like, it's someone who can
Yeah.
take a stand. Like, at some point, when it push comes to the show, this person is someone who can take a stand also.
What about you, Shavik? Like, what's been your learnings from these all these experiences?
Yeah, I'll connect this to the emotional side as well, and all of those things that Tejas as well mentioned. Approaching a end to a thing, to a client relationship really gives me this gut wrenching feeling. Like, it's like I don't like that feeling. I'm not charged up at the point of, I've never charged up at the point of when I want to end a relationship.
Mm.
There is a part of me that like fears that conversation, like don't want to engage with that. If I had a magic wand, can I wish it away, like kind of a thing. But I don't want to deal with that journey. uh, then uh, but before I approach this, I think I reach a point in my mind where there's an acceptance about the fact that there's going to be a short term loss in business. So I'm not a impulsive person from that perspective, that oh, I've done the thing and then I'm realizing what is the implication of that. I know what the implication of the things are. I have thought that through before I'm going and approaching. I still dislike approaching the that conversation, but I'm usually in a position where I've thought that through. uh
Mhm.
uh, then I guess after the conversation ends, uh, it might take a one conversation or two conversation for things to go through. I feel extremely empty in a certain strange way, which is because it's like, okay, has it happened, it has happened. There's like kind of I have actually I've actually done that thing. I somehow feel very empty at that point of time. It's still not a feeling of elation or happiness at that point of time. I even if I go through, I think there is a part of me which likes long term relationships, which never sees this in a very positive way that, hey, I've let even if it's a bad relationship, I don't think I feel like great about ending a relationship, because the thought that always I keep having in my mind is, could I have done things differently? And that is a thought that probably lingers on for a few months until like other things take over. It's never a thing. There is a little bit of relief that, yeah, the most immediate thing has gone, but what do have I learned from it? Could I have done things differently? At what point? It's very important for me to know that I there is something I could have done to not let into an end of this, and instead I could have navigated the way, like you just mentioned, Mohan has the ability to do these things, get the things started. I could have done that. Maybe the team could have done that. Maybe those things. So have those
Yeah.
conversations and thinking internally. I know in the there's also this question around, have I lost a long term business opportunity, kind of like, because every client refers us the next set of work, right, as well, right? So you are kind of losing the entire network from there, from that space. That and they're always good. Like, the fact that we have signed on a project obviously means that there is promise in that network as well, and you hope for new projects of that kind to come in. So I kind of feel that I've probably lost that entire network. I also question these things, that is this, if this client, and sometimes we have done this like 2 years later kind of thing, between me and Pratik, if the same client would approach us today again, would we want to do the like, do we want to do a fresh start with them? That is a
Mhm.
question. And that question is, I in very few cases where we have probably and in very few cases you go through two situations where you burned your fingers. Like, you don't experience the same burning twice, right? You usually there's only one time burn, and then you never had the opportunity to get burned twice. So if we get burned twice, then I don't think I get the feeling that, I feel that, yeah, it's good, we don't want work with them again. But if we have only burned once, and we have this, and it's ended and things like that, I still have that hope, I guess, in my mind, that maybe the next time we work, we'll be able to set expectation better, learn
Mm.
from that, and do a better business. But so far, I think that has not happened really, where we have worked again with someone, or with whom we have ended the project.
This reminds me of, I'm going to take it into a Bollywood direction. This reminds me of a dialogue that from a very well known Bollywood movie, DDLJ. Raj has with Simran's mother on the rooftop when she catches them singing a song together or meeting on the rooftop. And she says to him, like, here's all the jewels, like, take them and go, run away. And he says, like in the most corniest way, right? He says, like my grandma used to say, there's always like there'll be a lot of moments in life and you'll have choices to make. One will be the easy one and one will be the hard one. I know I could have said this whole thing in a very simpler way, but it wouldn't have been as much fun. He's like, दो फैसले होते हैं दो रास्ते होते हैं, right? So he's like the easy one or the hard one. And I find myself asking my that question in these kind of situations so much. I'm like, am I ending or am I thinking of ending the project just because it's the easy way out?
Yeah.
Or can I like is there like is there Mohan's way of dealing with things that I just find difficult? And can I, turn the situation around? So Sovik, like totally relate with that. Like, could you have done it differently? How could I have behaved? There's always that. Um, but I think over time I've just like I'm not in a studio right now, so I don't know. But like I think it kind of I think impacts internal projects as well. But like you just start trusting your gut more and more. The longer you do it, if I'm feeling this way, I know it's gone to a certain point where it's just become toxic and it just either it just needs to be resolved or it needs to be ended. But I think overall, like I wanted to kind of talk about what Tejas was saying as well, like the impact of all of ending projects for us. There's a big part of at least when we were running the studio, and I'm sure I know with both of you as well that y- you're running a studio is being means being opinionated. That what's the kind of work we're going to do? What are our principles? What values do we want to carry and support and all of that stuff? So I think a lot of times this also boils down to the intention versus the action. You can talk about all these things that these are our values. We're not going to work with these kind of clients, but if you don't act on it, then it doesn't work, right? You're so Tejas, you were talking about your team. And you were talking about, it's good for the team and the mental high. As a business owner, I think definitely you do need to think: is there a learning opportunity? Did we do something that we shouldn't have? And maybe that was just that. Why did we say yes to the project when we knew this was going to go bad? Because maybe I just need to be better at that, because it wouldn't have caused all this pain to the client, to me, delay, right? So maybe just as a business owner, you do need to look at the learning, but also you need to go, there are just certain times where you have to go, well, it's going against what we stand for, what we need to stand for.
Hmm.
So my intentions need to turn to actions at this point.
Yep.
um,
Absolutely.
from that point, I think most of the times whenever we've had to stop a project, it's always felt like the what we stood for like kind of outweighed the business impact. All obviously there's always a business impact. You lost a project, but it always felt like in 2-3 months we got another project. Fine, we had a couple of months of whatever, but we just felt came out of it feeling stronger. We still Everyone could still look at each other and go, yeah, that was wrong, so we had to do this. So there is definitely that side as well, and I can totally understand, even on the flip side, when sometimes clients let us go. It's not always that it's we're working with a big corporation and there was a small team that let us go and never thought about this again. Sometimes it has been, there's been like a small founder, one of the first projects that we worked on. She was putting her own money into this project, and 6 months in, we just said, like, this is not going to work again. Attitude, personality issues. It was a learning on her side as well. It's difficult as well, but it's kind of important to stick to what your intentions are, I think. So yeah, business impact is there, but I think I almost feel like the intentions and the actions are much more important at that point.
Right. I'd like to take the conversation towards a closure at this point of time. We are
Mm.
running the end of our time with a last round of questions. So Tejas, do you feel Tejas, and then Nav, you can take up this thing. Do you feel that is it it's a big deal to end a relationship? Do you think that it's something that uh, other small studios should explore, or should they try to navigate around? Uh, and any other closing thoughts around this stages? What do you feel?
So uh, just to take from the previous question, it's never fun to end a relationship. You still feel, like you said, you still feel that could it have been salvaged? Could it have been dealt with differently? You are always feeling that, and even at a human level, you feel like, probably nice people, but you need to end it. Having said all of that, I think as a business, you should definitely uh, be able to close, like let go of business, let go of clients, or let go of people. Like if it's a problem which cannot be solved at all, you should definitely be prepared to do that, because every business does that. uh, like studios are not some different sort of unicorns. You can't walk on a street, abuse a shop owner, and and expect to be sold things very well, right? You do that, they'll kick you out of the shop also. Probably not really right, in the in the least violent way possible, they'll turn you down. They won't provide you service. I
Hmm.
don't think studios should be any different. I agree with another point that it leaves an impact on your network. And as small studios, we rely a lot on network to get new business. But it's probably uh, a, a step you need to take, even if it pushes you in the direction of finding other or different avenues of marketing and sales, right?
Hmm.
Maybe that's the learning you take away from that, that our network effect can only take us this far, and probably we need some different avenue for marketing and sales. But that should not be a fear that holds you back from ending a bad relationship. Do it in the best way possible. It is possible that certain people in the client's team see the value in what you are doing, kind of agree with you as well. And I'll give the credit to this to someone who taught me this was Raul Gonsalves. It was like, a project manager who's working with you right now might move to a different company altogether. If you have dealt with this professionally, he'll take a very good impression of you, and kind of then your network effect can still continue. It ends with this organization, but should not end with the set of people that you're
The
working with,
individuals. Yeah.
right? The individuals that you're working with. So to answer very succinctly, I think every studio, when if a relationship gets into a very toxic sort of a zone, you should definitely end it. Um, there's you can always find new work and everything else. Uh, if the end is bringing you mental peace, you should definitely do that.
Yeah, totally.
Nav.
Like, I was actually gonna just say the same thing, that I think if you've come to a point where you feel like this relationship's not gonna work with the client, I almost always think there is no other option but to end it. It should be that way. Like, if it's come to that point, like we were talking about, yeah, there's sometimes you went back and thought that maybe I should have ended it. But the truth at that point was you at some point, some level felt it was going to be okay. It didn't come to that point where you could just end, you had to end it, right? If it comes to that point, you, I think over time, need to just get better at being able to recognize those situations. Um, if you're in a bad situation, you can't do good work. So you know at the core of your heart that the work that's going to go out isn't going to be the best. It just isn't. So it is not fair either. Um, it's not fun, never fun. I totally agree with Tejas on that, but that doesn't mean it has to end sour. Like, it's not fun. That conversation that I had with that guy I was telling you about, it wasn't a fun conversation, but it was one of the hardest conversations. But he just managed to turn it around in such a nice, positive way. I walked out of it thinking I learned so much from that one conversation. Like, oh, wow, this is how you can deal with these kind of conversations. That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, it's not fun. I don't think it needs to be sour. Uh, and like, couldn't agree more with what they just said around it's the organization. It's the even I would even say it's not always the organization. It's the
Yeah,
scenario. It's the
yeah,
situation
yeah,
that you're trying to diffuse, and you're trying to go, this can't happen. You can go back and work with the same organization.
yeah,
It, in some cases, it's okay. It's okay. You're just
yeah,
working in a different part of the scenario. But the people building relations, like, it is all about, at the end of the day, I think these kind of situations are about the people and relationships. And that's proved to me so many times. You could end the thing in a certain way, um, and it'll, if you've maintained to have a good relationship through all of this, it will just always be okay. It will just always
yeah,
be okay. It doesn't apply just to ending client relationships. Applies to ending jobs. If you're working at a job, you can end that job and still end up working with the people again. You don't have to end sour, right? So I think
Perfect. I
nothing
think that's
to
a
add.
that's a great closure. I think to say that it's
I'll,
not a big deal. You can. You want to add anything, Tejas?
no, 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 go ahead.
Okay, so I was just saying it's not a big deal. You can go ahead and do it, but do it in a way where you are ending the project or the job, but not botching up the relationship in a way. I
Yeah,
think that
yeah.
is a good takeaway from this conversation.
So
So thanks a lot for
I'll
yeah.
just end. I just because Nev brought in a DDLJ reference. I would end this with a Dil Chahta Hai reference. So when Preeti Zinta's character like is getting married to this guy, and Amir Khan shows up, and there's kind of an altercation between the Preeti Zinta's supposed to be husband and
Yeah.
Amir Khan, and that guy's parents, like father, tells the guy Ayub Khan, like, let her go, because if she is not happy with you, how will you be happy with her?
Yeah.
If you are supposed to spend your life together, but she is not happy with you, you wouldn't be happy with her either. So you should let her go. I think that's
I think that's inspired by DDLJ as well. Ja Simran, जी ले अपनी
Just
जिंदगी.
okay, with all that Bollywood references, which I never expected in two studio heads walk into a bar. Thanks a lot, Nav. Thanks a lot, Tejas, for this conversation and
Thanks,
everyone who
Rohit.
joined us live in this. I just want to remind that we have a Twitter handle which is Two Studio Heads, which you should follow, and also tell us what kind of topics we should take up in our future communication and future conversations. If you would like to join any of these topics to discuss a business topic around creative services, please again DM us on this Twitter, and we'll get back to you, and we'll try to have you in our future conversations. Uh, Also, this is probably first time we know this week what is it that we'll be talking about 2 weekends later. So I might as well take this opportunity to just say that on November 6th, it's Bhai Dooj. It will be a festive week, but I guess we can still do a good conversation and a recording here for others to watch later. We Nav, I, and if maybe some other people, we're still trying to. If you would like to join this conversation, please reach out as well. We're going to talk about this topic: how to triple a client's budget, because Nav had mentioned this, I think in the first or the second episode, and since then it has stuck in my mind. How the hell do you triple a client's budget? So to catch that conversation, just tune in on
Maybe,
the 6th of November.
warning, it may be a bit clickbaity.
Okay. All right. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for
All right,
tuning in.
thanks.